Awesome, yeah.
Welcome to the Sleep Experience podcast, where we take a deep dive into the latest sleep hacks, gadgets, and strategies to skyrocket your productivity to new heights. Being a high performer is all about resting at 100%, so you can execute at 100%.
Side effects of medication, they weren't doing anything for me, so I felt like my back was up against the wall. Hey, this is Riley, host of the Sleep Experience podcast. At the Sleep Experience podcast, we interview health experts and teach our community how upgrading their sleep is the one thing that they need to unlock their biological code and maximize their performance in an effortless way by doing more with less. Do you want to become a productivity machine, have genius ideas automatically pop into your mind, stop feeling so stressed, build better relationships, and generate more income? Optimizing your deep sleep can do just that. Visit www.thesleepconsultant.com to learn more. My guest today is Dr. Tomek Pajak. For 2 decades, Dr. Pajak has explored health and human performance. An injury at 17 introduced him to holistic healing, guiding him to degrees from Simon Fraser University and the University of Western States. In Washington State's top clinics, he quickly saw over 10,000 patients, and an injury deepened his focus on emotional stresses affecting healing. By 2019, he launched a Neuro Lounge in Vancouver, blending holistic methods with modern technologies like neurofeedback and red light therapy, enhancing holistic wellness and mental performance. Dr. Pajak, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Awesome.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure to have you on. And I saw you in person really not too long ago. And, experiencing what I felt is unlike, something I've had in my life. And I've done a lot of this stuff. So it's really an honor to have you on the show today. And I'm really curious, and I ask guests all this, what got them into their journey of health? And everyone is so different, but I was really curious of yours. What got you into, health when you were looking to study, become a chiropractor, and then transitioning into what you're doing more today?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I originally got into chiropractic, more looking to do like sports medicine, sports injury. My first chiropractor I had was at the age of 17, and he played like for Team Canada soccer team. And so it was very more like physical injury based. And I did a lot of that for the early part of my career. And then I started the whole Neuro Lounge started about 8 years ago when I had an injury that wasn't healing. So as a chiropractor, I always kind of took care of myself with chiropractic, massage therapy, and physiotherapy, and I'd always felt really good. But those modalities weren't working anymore. So I started looking and going on this journey, going to all these different practitioners. Went to probably about 15 different types of chiropractors because there's a lot of different styles and approaches that I'd heard about. I went to a lot of naturopaths and just tried a lot of different approaches. So that's kind of where it all started.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And then transitioning today, how are you mainly helping people? And are there any transformations that pop up that you're, kind of driven by?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's something that I call, it was my perspective shift moment. And it was with a chiropractor actually that does similar work to what I do, which back then I used to think it was like voodoo. I'm like, what is that bullshit? Because it's you experience it, right? It's very, very gentle, more of an energetic approach, works with the nervous system, works with the brain. But he did a session with me, and then we sat down and had a chat, and he started asking me some pretty hard questions, because at that point in my life, I would say I was in denial. I had this almost like two separate lives going. In one end of the spectrum, I was this chiropractor, going to the office, working on people, working on their injuries. And then in my personal life, I was drinking 3-4 days a week. I got caught up in like recreational drugs. I was gluten-free, but I wasn't eating healthy, especially after those hangovers. And so, and honestly, it didn't sink in that could be contributing to like why my body was breaking down, why my anxiety was getting worse, like why all these things were really building up. But he literally just like looked me in the eye and he's like, so tell me, because no one else asked me because I looked healthy, I looked healthy on the outside. And the reality is when I work with people now, when the nervous system is in a stress state, it's very easy to be disconnected and not aware of what's happening in your life. So by connecting those dots with the brain, with the body, it's that awareness. It almost became like so clear to me. I was like, oh my God, I'm doing this to myself. And so combining that with doing some brain training, meditation, and the body work, over the next couple of years, like completely clean, sober, like new
Wow.
energy. So that's how the journey started. And then with all
Wow.
these approaches and technology, I was like, well, I got to learn how to do this, because
Hmm.
he literally, after like one session, was able to shift like my whole mindset, my whole perspective. So
Just one. Wow.
I've been studying that for the last 6 years, and I
Hmm.
opened the Neuro Lounge about 3.5 years ago, combining those technologies.
That's so interesting, and it's interesting too how people they start their journey. They don't feel well. They go the conventional route. Get prescribed medication. They don't want to go on that, so they keep looking, looking, looking. Sometimes they go to functional medicine, and they do a lot of that physical stuff. But I think a level above that is where you kind of go more into the energies and helping people. Like sort of what you did to me, lying on the massage table and working. Whatever. Modality that is. Could you explain a little bit of what that's like? So somebody comes in to see you, and I realize you have PEMF machines, red light therapy, and all those different modalities, but that one specifically, how does it work exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's called network spinal analysis, or network spinal
Mm,
now. And it was developed by his name's Dr. Donnie Epstein over the last 40 years, and is developed as a chiropractic technique,
mm,
but it just became more and more refined at getting the biggest impact in the nervous system in the
got it.
quickest, shortest amount of time. And so it does incorporate a lot of things that other chiropractic techniques don't really incorporate, like the different
Mm,
like energy bodies, the different like neurological reflexes. But it's really about reconnecting some of the disconnected parts of ourselves,
mm.
especially in the early parts of the care.
Yeah. I think that's really good. So somebody comes in to see you. Do you work with all kinds of people? Are there people who already have some kind of ailment? Are they more of the biohacker optimizer types, or is it a hybrid approach for both kinds of people?
It's kind of a hybrid. So
Yeah.
I opened the Neuro Lounge, and our location has a lot of like healthy people. So we have
Mm,
like actors and athletes come in, but we also are accessible for the average person just dealing with stress, dealing with chronic pain.
mhm.
Those are kind of the two main things: the negative effects of stress, chronic pain, anxiety. Those respond really well to our services.
That's amazing. So somebody who just comes in for a tune-up, they can do that too, or if they want something longer term, they can go that route as well. How about just your overall philosophy in health? Looking back on your entire journey, how do you have a model that you sort of put everything into? What prioritizes what, or is it a case by case basis with each person you work with?
Yeah, over the years, I've really developed a major respect and honor for the body's self healing capacity.
Mm,
So, with like a vitalistic model where your body's always seeking balance, seeking harmony, it's actually always trying to do the best for you.
mm,
And so, finding modalities and approaches that support that rather
mm.
than completely override or interfere with that.
Got it.
Does that
Interesting.
make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying.
Because yeah, I find even let's use chiropractic for an example. The way I
Mm,
was taught in chiropractic school is someone has tight muscles, you start working on that area.
sure.
You stretch the muscle, you adjust that area if there's a misalignment.
Mm,
And when I was suffering, I literally felt like I had a huge like misalignment in my upper neck, and
mm,
all the muscles around it were just like bound up.
yeah.
And a lot of the chiropractors I went to, they just worked on that area.
Mm,
And what I call that area like a defense. And so
mm,
our body's natural defense mechanisms are protective mechanisms. And in my case, it was likely in this defense because of my lifestyle, because of
mm,
my emotional state.
yeah.
And so with network spinal, instead of the chiropractor that worked me, didn't even touch there. He actually
Mm,
pressed on a few spots in my pelvis,
yeah.
and then that area started to release. So it's
Wow.
basically giving energy to the system so the
Yeah.
system can upregulate better. And the modalities that I choose, like the red light therapy, the PMF therapy,
Mm,
they're all basically just giving more energy to the system. So it's a
mm,
holistic approach where
yeah.
whether you have cancer or just like a shoulder injury, those modalities are going to be supportive regardless.
Sure, absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. And are there some similarities to that with somatic experiencing, for example, where it's sort of physical, dealing more with the body opposed to strictly the mind?
Absolutely, yeah. So
Yeah.
a lot of what I've noticed in a lot of my research is
Mm,
there's quite a few different uh, fields and practitioners kind of merging into this type of work. So a lot of like counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists may start doing some more like somatic type therapies with like somatic experiencing, or even like EMDR therapy. And I saw a physiotherapist, a PhD physio, who was actually incorporating a lot of the body awareness, like tuning into disconnected areas to help the emotional state. So I think people are really seeking the best, solutions, optimal health. They'll realize it's not just a physical issue, and some of the energetics and emotions have to be addressed, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. And I think it's something that sometimes people have to experience and see the results for themselves until they're like, wow, I wish I started that sooner. As you know, it's been the case with me and so many other people you work with, I'm sure. How about, your average entrepreneur? There's a lot of like venture capitalists, high level entrepreneurs that listen to the show. How can they improve their performance? A lot of them, they're burning the candle at both ends. They might be feeling like an average 7 or 8. They sacrifice sleep, you know, sacrifice health in order to get ahead, make more money, etc. What do you have to say with that model, and how can they start improving their health?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and when entrepreneurs, most of them want more energy, right?
Yeah.
And because they're, like I said, burning the candle at both ends, and, getting depleted at the end of the day, not sleeping. And so the way a lot of our services work, I like to think of it as, I always tell people, when you think of the nervous system, think of it like a computer or an operating system.
Mm-hmm.
And just like a computer or operating system, it has like a finite capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And when you surpass that capacity, that's when your system, your whole body loses what we call homeostasis. And homeostasis is a state of balance, equilibrium, where your body's able to heal, digest, repair, all those beautiful things I was talking about. But when you surpass your capacity, your body shifts naturally into what we call that defense strategy, which is actually over 1,200, biochemical reactions that are no longer geared towards growth and repair. They're geared towards short-term survival. So, you're not going to have energy for digestion. You're actually going to have less energy for like executive function. Blood flow patterns go away from the, prefrontal cortex. So get basically anything that will give you more bandwidth will be really noticeable for an entrepreneur, for anyone looking for more performance. And with the spine and nervous system, it's really it's like the computer. So anything that gives your body, there's three components that I break it down into.
Sure.
There's balance, there's flexibility, and then there's awareness. So that's somatic awareness that we're talking about. When you work on those three components, you're going to give yourself more and more bandwidth, more and more capacity. And it's just like fuel for everything, fuel for healing, fuel for performance, fuel for business, right?
Yeah, totally. And if somebody wants to start, bringing this into their life, how long can they expect to see results? I mean, I'm sure with one session, absolutely. But is it, I see it as more of a lifestyle once you started, seeing what these different modalities are. But when someone wants to get, 50% better, get all the way better, what does that timeline and roadmap usually look like for people?
Absolutely. Yeah. So taking care of the nervous system, like you said, it's a lifelong thing. So, it's really probably, I think it should be most people's priority.
Sure.
When I work with people, we talk about neuroplasticity. And so that's how you can get permanent changes in the patterns and the connections within your nervous system.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen in as early as 2 to 3 months. And that's for long-term change. Now that's in the like the 3-dimensional model of neurology and how the nervous system works. Energetically, it's a whole nother world. And what I've learned energetically, it's almost like we have these thresholds. And so think of it as, this concept sometimes a little bit hard to grasp, but it's almost like you're at one threshold, and as long as you have enough energy for that threshold, you'll kind of be there. And to get to the next threshold, you're going to need like more energy, more resources in your body and your system. When you get to that next threshold, it's like a whole new reality, a whole new experience for your body, for your mind. And there's multiple like thresholds. So the times when I see someone literally go in like one visit and they're like, transform my life, they're usually like right on the threshold. They've usually been doing some things, and then we've just supported that leap to the next threshold.
Yeah.
And then someone, if they're like at the bottom of their threshold, they can take 2 months before they even feel a difference, right?
Yeah, completely. And a lot of this reminds me a bit of Joe Dispenza. I know you've studied his work for some time. Could you maybe elaborate? I know when we were in person, you had mentioned some of the things of the one thing that is held constant is, that human belief. But could you touch a little bit on Joe Dispenza's in his work and what you really take out of that?
Yeah. So I've read most of Joe Dispenza's books, and
Mm-hmm.
and this was actually before when I was still suffering,
Okay.
and I actually tried like reading his meditations, and
Mm-hmm.
I actually didn't feel any shifts, and I'll explain why that happened, because I know a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people do get these big transformations,
Sure.
but it really has to do with the state of my brain and nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
because he talks about this where he really tries to get people in what we call theta brainwave when he's doing his transformational like meditations, and when he's doing his transformational retreats. It's usually you're no longer in your like thinking upper mind.
Yeah.
You're in this like open, almost like trance, like hypnotic state.
Yeah.
And for me, when I was suffering, just reading his book and reading his meditations, that wasn't happening. I was still up in
Mm-hmm.
that beta brainwave frequency. And so with like what he said when I mentioned to you is the biggest thing that he's seen with people who move through like pretty serious like illnesses and diseases is
Mm-hmm.
they have this, like I said, my perspective shift. And when you shift your
Sure.
perspective, I feel like you're completely shifting your frequency and your
Yeah.
energy. So you're no
Totally.
longer the same person,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so, but I believe a lot of spiritual teachers say you have to get into some of those deeper states, like the theta brainwaves,
Mm.
and sometimes even like into the gamma brainwaves. So you can't do it from
Yeah.
your thinking mind, and
Yeah.
that's why I fell in love with the technology that we use, which is the brain tap light and sound therapy,
Mm.
because it uses light and sound frequencies to get
Mhm.
your brain into that state while you're listening to guided meditations, hypnotherapy. So it's using the
Mm.
exact same principles and science of Joe Dispenza, but
Yeah.
it's adding those additional components to ensure that your nervous system is open and ready for those shifts.
Yeah, I think that's so key because how many high performing people do you see try meditation and they just stop because they try to sit down, focus on their breath, and their mind just won't slow down and shut up. So I
Mhm.
think getting into those deeper states, and that's when, back in my early entrepreneur days, listening to like Bob Proctor and some of these other guys, you have to get your mind into that relaxed state before you start that visualization process. And I think that is so key. And then using technology to our advantage to aid and facilitate that, I think is really, really powerful. A little bit on the tech side of things and the biohackers. What's exciting you, whether it's PMF or other devices or potentially what's on the horizon? Where do you stand with all that?
Yeah, and like, so one thing I tell people with the whole like vitalistic model, I do believe that there is like a limit to what we can do with our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get into that like optimal state of harmony and balance within your brain, within your nervous system, I feel like bringing too many exogenous things in can actually
Mm-hmm.
disrupt that a little bit.
Okay.
And so, and I particularly mean that with things like nootropics.
Yeah.
I've done like a ton of nootropics throughout the years, and I found that they helped.
Mm-hmm.
But as the more balanced I got my brain and nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
and just sticking to like the basics, like
Mm-hmm.
hydration, exercise, those types of things. Those are kind of the main building blocks. But one thing that I think everybody could benefit from, whether they're already in balance or not,
Mm-hmm.
is something called, and this is something that I've been kind of doing on my own before I heard of this, but have you heard of the superhuman protocol?
Yeah, it sounds very familiar.
Yeah, so basically what it is it's using PMF, so pulse
Mm-hmm.
electromagnetic field therapy, exercise with oxygen therapy, and red light, full body red light therapy. So you do all three,
Yeah.
and that's very like activating and kind of checks off a lot of the boxes on a cellular level, on
Cool.
a neurological level.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's all these centers blowing up in the U.S. and they
Yeah.
do like the superhuman protocol. and yeah, they're doing like, measuring blood work before and after. So
Wow.
so, so doing like a version of that, because like I said, I've
Yeah.
had the PMF mats. I've been doing that for about 4 years. I have the full body
Sure.
red light therapy. I've been doing that for about 4 years. The only
Yeah.
thing I don't have is the exercise
Oxygen.
with oxygen therapy, or you
Mm.
could potentially also do it with hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Mm.
But
Okay.
that's pretty rare and hard. It's actually, I think it's banned in Canada right now. I don't think you can even.
Oh, is that right?
They do have a few
Yeah.
centers that were kind of grandfathered in, but I
Yeah.
don't think you can buy like new hyperbaric oxygen tanks and bring them into Canada at this point.
Okay. Yeah, it's unfortunate. That's definitely the Brian Johnson protocol, but anyone should be using that. But you hear a lot about Ben Greenfield and Dave Asprey talking a lot about these things. But I mean, that trifecta protocol, I mean, that definitely sounds like the superhuman one. I think, it's still sort of early in the science of it, but the science that is coming out with some of those things, it's pretty amazing the results that
Mm,
are coming from it.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Last thing I just wanted to touch on is a little bit on trauma. People think trauma is something related to do with, a very serious event that happened during their childhood, but it can be forms of micro trauma. For example, when they were bullied in the past, or maybe they felt abandoned or anything like that. What can people do in an efficient way? And I'm sure what you talked about can really get to the root of some of those to really release the trauma that might be holding them back, maybe from one of those thresholds that you talked about.
Yeah. So the way I look at trauma is it's just events. They're events and they're energetic events that push you past your bandwidth.
Mm,
So whether it's extremely traumatic, like like a military trauma where it's way past your bandwidth, or a more like a minor trauma where, like you said, maybe like you didn't make the basketball team or something like that, but it's
mm,
still more energy that your system could actually process at the time.
mm,
And so it actually starts to change. It changes the nervous system every time that happens. And the way I've been taught is almost like it's stored in your body in the hopes that you have enough energy to process and handle it at a later time.
mm,
And so I've worked with like military PTSD. I work with quite a few firefighters who have quite a bit of PTSD.
mm.
And the best way is really connecting and building that bandwidth that we talked about.
Yeah.
The more you build the bandwidth, it's almost like we don't even have to talk about the events, but
Mm,
they'll process through the system. A lot of times people will experience like just an emotion. They'll either cry or they'll be
mm,
really angry. And then the next day they'll be like, oh, that doesn't trigger me anymore.
mm.
That's weird.
Amazing. And it's sort of interesting how you can still have that same memory of something in the past, but you don't have that same emotional charge there and you don't have that weight. So now your brain and your body just have more bandwidth to start living freely and everything that goes along with it. So I think there's definitely a lot to that. Any
Absolutely.
last words of wisdom before we close things off for listeners today?
Um, one thing that kind of came to me. So you mentioned neurofeedback. That's something that I studied for 2 years.
Mm,
And neurofeedback, for those who don't know, it uses sensors on the brain, measuring the brainwave frequencies, and looking for areas of overactivity, underactivity, and imbalance, and then naturally training those areas back through feedback. Through, you like watch a computer screen while the sensors are on your head, and then you get feedback when it's like moving in the right direction, and then you get negative feedback when it's moving in the opposite direction. And although it's a very powerful tool, I found it was still just it was missing something, and it was missing
mm,
the somatic body component,
yeah.
because I was doing it virtually with some people, and I found they weren't getting the same results as when we combined like a brainwave strategy combined with a body strategy.
Interesting.
So one of my mentors talks about how it's almost like our body is its own like different sets of brains, and that even
Yeah.
some people say it's almost like it has 7 brains inside of it.
Yeah.
These like neurologic centers that kind of
Right.
perform on their own. So if you're
Hmm.
just working on one area, you
Yeah.
sometimes miss like the deeper root, and the whole kind of system can still be kind of wired wrong.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
definitely noticed that myself doing neurofeedback. I mean, I'm a bit of a biohacker myself, so I've probably done 300 sessions over the years. But I definitely noticed that too, where my body would feel tight, and I still would feel cut off from my neck down. And working more on that body based stuff just it just does so much more integrating that. You can't really outthink your problems. You can make your brain faster and you can make your brain have different brain waves, but you're right. It really has to come down to the body and back to that holistic, balanced approach.
Awesome.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on today. I learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners did as well.
Awesome. And then I'm curious what you think is the most exciting biohacking tech coming up.
Oh man, there's so many. What I'm really interested in is hyperbaric oxygen therapy is one that I'm really looking at. But also, I recently read Dave Asprey's new book, and the Bulletproof Labs. It was in Victoria, British Columbia, that had closed down, and they have that one down in Santa Monica. But like you said, there's all these different ones, including yours, that are opening up. But I really like. I'm a little interested in electricity, what that's going to do to people. Not with voltages and. In theory, it's good, but I want to see the application of it. Whether or not I want to be the first person to do it, I'm not so sure. But I think besides that, it's anti-aging, longevity. And you see a lot of these millionaires and billionaires investing in these anti-aging efforts. And you look at David Sinclair, who wrote the book about longevity, who works at Harvard. And just it's really amazing what's coming out about it around that. And I think it's also kind of, you had ketogenic diet, which, was kind of that sexy word. But longevity and anti-aging is, I'm seeing, becoming that new one. And all these just other modalities that a lot of people aren't aware of. But things that you just said on the energy level, I've recently started exploring because I was so focused on the functional side that I'm really, that's, for me at least, that's what makes me really excited.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the key is people have to realize it's not going to be one thing, right? They're all just supporting that natural ecosystem of the body, right?
Totally. That's what it is. You have to take a balanced approach, start somewhere, and then see what works best for you. All right, guys. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to learn more about how sleep can benefit your personal business life, visit thesleepconsultant.com. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Sleep Experience podcast. We'll see you next time on next week's episode. Be sure to subscribe and follow us to get future updates on everything sleep, energy, focus, stress, and better performance.